one from the investment company that he founded. The State Department says it's monitoring this case.
I'm so irritated. They are telling me that Joe has been released. You got it right. He has been released. He's not detained. So where is Joe at? What is he doing? How is he doing? Everybody's trying to get in contact with Joe, but Joe is a no-show.
Joe calls Ashlee's parents 11 hours after the fact to tell them that something has gone on with their daughter. The parents come out with a statement saying that Ashlee was deeply loved, she was vibrant, full of life, and had so much ahead of her. But she hangs her—
Y'all, this isn't just another leak. This feels like the exact moment the entire narrative starts collapsing in on itself. What once looked sealed, contained, and understood is now unraveling thread by thread, and right at the center stands Joe McCann. But now, a new dimension is surfacing, one that pulls Kevin Gates into the frame, as alleged recordings tied to his name reportedly land under federal examination. Here's the backdrop: quick but critical. An arrest. A case that appeared controlled, and now, audio fragments emerging from the shadows, pushing investigators to revisit everything they thought they knew. But this is where the weight really drops, because insiders suggest these recordings aren't just casual exchanges, they hint at something continuous. Alleged voice notes sharing real-time up-to-testing stamps indicating communication both before and after the incident, and patterns that some believe point to coordination, not coincidence. And if even a fraction of that proves true, then this wasn't an isolated event, this was a sequence. The emotional impact is immediate. A family already carrying unimaginable loss is now confronting something far more complex, the idea that the truth may have been layered, hidden beneath the surface from the very beginning. Now step back and compare the timeline. At first, swift conclusions, barely any resistance, then quiet, now recordings, renewed pressure, and a narrative that refuses to stay still. That shift matters, because cases don't expand after an arrest, unless something forces them open. So the questions start stacking. Was something unfolding behind the scenes all along? Were certain connections missed or deliberately ignored? Then come the details that don't sit right. Alleged communication during travel. Consistent updates. A chain of contact still being dissected piece by piece. Zoom out and suddenly, it doesn't feel contained to one individual anymore. One comment online captured the tension perfectly. If those recordings are real, then everything we were told was incomplete. And now, the pressure is undeniable. More eyes watching, more voices demanding clarity, more cracks forming in what once felt solid. So now it comes down to this: are these leaks finally uncovering what was buried, or exposing just how much of the truth is still out there, waiting?
Beyonce is saying everything that's going on to happen. But not only that, y'all also say that y'all still have the fiance in custody. Y'all still have him in custody, but y'all got to do further investigation and further examination before you release him to find out the exact cause of death.
He had 1,500 followers. And yeah, I went and looked through some of the followers list. It was full of Black women. When I went back today, earlier, who knows what it's at now, he was at 2,600. How in a row did this story just come out and he gained even more followers?
Ashlee was okay and she was stable and she was okay and don't worry about it.
But that she was at the hospital.
Yes. 11 hours.
This is the point where the story stops feeling like a routine update and starts sounding like something that was never supposed to come to light. What once seemed contained is now pushing into unfamiliar ground, and right at the center stands Joe McCann. While a new dimension forms around Kevin Gates as alleged recordings begin quietly reshaping everything. Here's the backdrop. An arrest that appeared to bring clarity. A case people believed was tightening, but then it expanded. Because according to circulating claims, investigators are now reviewing alleged audio clips and communication trails that hint at something far more layered than first assumed. Alleged voice notes now under review, call logs suggesting repeated points of contact and messages being examined for meaning beneath the surface. If even part of that lines up, then this was never one isolated moment, it was a chain of events. The emotional impact lands differently now, because this isn't just about new details, it's about recognizing how much may have stayed out of view. A family that once endured silence is now facing something heavier. The possibility that the truth came in layers they were never given. Now compare the timeline. At first, everything moves fast. A direction is set. A conclusion takes hold, then nothing, silence. No visible escalation, and now recording surface, pulling everything back into question. That kind of shift changes everything, because cases don't usually widen after an arrest, unless something disrupts the foundation. So the questions begin stacking. Was there more unfolding behind the scenes? Were certain connections never fully explored? Because once communication enters the picture, intent becomes impossible to ignore. And that's where it gets heavier. Now look at the details being discussed. Alleged ongoing contact. Mentions of updates being shared. A pattern investigators are now trying to reconstruct piece by piece. And when those elements are viewed together, it starts to feel deliberate, not random. Zoom out, and a broader system starts to take shape. If multiple links are now under scrutiny, then the questions move beyond just individuals. How much was known earlier? What was left unexamined? Why are these details only appearing now? One reaction online captured the shift perfectly. If those recordings are real, then the story was never whole. And now the escalation is impossible to ignore. Public attention is rising again. Voices are growing louder. The demand for answers is building. Because at this stage, it's no longer just about what happened. It's about whether the version people accepted was ever complete. Which leads to the final question: are these alleged recordings finally exposing what was kept hidden? Or are they only the first signal of a story that's still far from fully understood?
Whether or not she took her own life, or was it her fiancé? Well, according to Zanzibar police, they have ruled the sides, claiming that Ashlee Jenae, also her real name Ashlee Robinson, hung herself in a wardrobe using cloth from her dress after a dispute with her fiancé.
He's in a pre-station cell. He is not allowed to leave. They are questioning him around the clock.
I think Joe McCann is going to spend the rest of his life in Tanzania prison. He's going to spend the rest of his life in Tanzania prison because, just hear me out, right? He cannot use any U.S. resources. He can't use a U.S. attorney. He has to get his attorney from Tanzania. Not only that, but Tanzania don't care about...
This is the moment where the story stops feeling like a leak and starts resembling a timeline that was never fully brought into the light. What once appeared contained is now peeling back in layers, and at the center stands Joe McCann. While alleged recordings tied to Kevin Gates are now forcing investigators to question everything they thought was settled. Here's the setup. An arrest created a sense of closure. A narrative took shape, and for a brief moment, it felt steady. But then, fractures began to show. Because according to circulating claims, these alleged recordings don't just capture isolated exchanges, they point toward continuity. Voice notes said to reflect ongoing updates, call logs indicating repeated contact across time and communication patterns now being examined for intent and sequence. If even part of that holds, then this wasn't one incident, it was a progression. The emotional weight deepens here, because this isn't just about uncovering new details, it's about what those details suggest beneath the surface. A family that once waited for clarity is now facing something more difficult. The possibility that the truth had been unfolding quietly the entire time. Now compare the timeline again. At first, everything moves fast. A version of events is presented and accepted, then silence. And now recordings surface, and suddenly the case begins to expand. That contrast isn't minor, it's defining, because when a case grows after it's meant to be closed, it points to something that wasn't fully understood. So the theory continues to build. Was there a hidden layer of communication shaping events? Were connections missed, or simply never explored? Because once patterns of contact enter the investigation, the focus shifts from what happened to why it happened. And that's where it becomes heavier. Now consider the more unsettling elements being discussed. Alleged contact maintained across different locations, references to updates being shared in real time. A sequence investigators are now attempting to reconstruct piece by piece. And when those elements begin to align, it stops feeling random. It starts to feel organized. Zoom out, and the broader system angle becomes harder to ignore. If these connections hold, then the case isn't just about individuals anymore. It's about how the situation was interpreted, and possibly misinterpreted. Why certain details surfaced late, why the narrative remained narrow for so long. One reaction gaining traction sums it up in a single line: if these recordings are real, then the truth didn't begin where we were told it did. And now, the escalation can't be ignored. Public attention is surging again. Speculation is tightening its grip. The demand for answers is louder than it's ever been. Because this isn't just about what happened anymore, it's about how much of it was actually shown. And the deeper this goes, the harder it becomes to separate what was known from what stayed buried. Which brings everything to one final question: are these alleged recordings finally laying out the full sequence, or are they only revealing how much of the story is still missing? This is the point where everything stops feeling like an investigation and starts feeling like something that was unfolding in real time, just beyond view. A case that once seemed controlled is now splitting into layers, and at the center of the shift is Joe McCann. While alleged recordings linked to Kevin Gates are forcing a deeper, more uncomfortable re-examination. Here's what's becoming impossible to ignore. An arrest that once felt like an ending is now being treated like a beginning. New claims, new links, a narrative that refuses to stay in place. But this is where the story shifts from complex to deeply unsettling, because according to circulating claims, these alleged recordings don't just show contact, they point to continuity, structure, and timing that investigators can't easily dismiss. Alleged voice notes capturing updates as they unfold, call patterns suggesting repeated, ongoing communication, and timestamps now being matched against critical moments in the timeline. If even part of that withstands scrutiny, then this wasn't a single event, it was a progression. The emotional weight intensifies here, because this isn't just about new information, it's about what that information suggests beneath the surface. A family already searching for answers is now confronting something heavier. The possibility that the truth was unfolding step by step, without anyone fully seeing it. Now take another look at the timeline, carefully. At first, everything moves quickly. A version of events is accepted. A direction is locked in, then silence. No deeper questions. No visible expansion, and now suddenly alleged recordings surface, and the case begins to grow. That kind of shift doesn't happen without cause, because when a case expands after it's supposed to close, it points to something that wasn't complete from the start. And that's where the theory reaches its most intense point. Was there an unseen layer of communication shaping events behind the scenes? Were these connections always present, but never fully examined? Because once communication patterns become part of the evidence, the focus shifts from what happened to how it unfolded, and that changes everything. Now consider the most unsettling details being discussed. Alleged contact maintained across locations, even while traveling. References to updates being shared almost in real time. A sequence investigators are now trying to reconstruct frame by frame. And when those pieces begin to align, it stops feeling like coincidence. It begins to feel intentional, and that's where the weight of this case turns heavier than ever before. Because this is no longer just about actions. It's about coordination, awareness, and possible influence. And the moment influence enters a case like this, the questions stop being about individuals alone. Now the focus drifts toward the system itself. What was known from the beginning? What was left untouched? Why are these layers only coming to light now? One reaction gaining traction captures that shift exactly. If these recordings are real, then the truth didn't vanish, it was never fully visible. And now the escalation reaches its highest point. Public attention is no longer passive, it's intense. Every detail is under a microscope, every gap is being challenged. Because this isn't just about resolving a case anymore, it's about understanding how the narrative was constructed in the first place. Why certain details were highlighted, and why others stayed buried beneath the surface. And the deeper this goes, the harder it becomes to separate the original version from what's now surfacing. Because what once looked like a clean timeline now feels like overlapping layers. And that shift changes everything. The emotional weight lands one final time. A family still searching. A public still watching. A story that refuses to settle into one version. Because at this point, it's no longer just about what happened. It's about whether the full truth was ever meant to be seen all at once. And that leads to the final, unavoidable question. Are these alleged recordings finally revealing the complete sequence of events? Or are they only exposing how much of the story still remains hidden beneath the surface? This is the moment where the story stops being controlled and starts unfolding on its own, in full public view. What once seemed contained is now breaking apart, and with Joe McCann at the center, and alleged recordings tied to Kevin Gates under scrutiny, the pressure isn't fading, it's intensifying. Because this isn't just about what was said. It's about when it was said, how often it was said, and why those details are only emerging now. The timeline no longer feels clean, the narrative no longer feels whole, and the questions are growing louder by the second. If these alleged recordings carry any truth, then this wasn't just a moment, it was something that unfolded over time, and that changes everything. A case that once moved quickly is now under constant scrutiny. A story that once felt complete now feels fractured. A truth that once seemed simple now feels layered. This is where attention becomes critical, because when stories like this begin to expand, they don't slow down, they either get exposed, or they disappear beneath the surface. So don't just watch this unfold, track every detail, question every shift, pay attention to what's being said and what isn't. Because silence in a story like this can speak just as loudly as evidence. And right now, nothing about this feels quiet. So ask yourself, are we finally watching the full truth come together, or just witnessing the part of the story that couldn't stay hidden any longer?